Welcome, everybody. We're having another episode of our Building Resilient podcast. In this podcast, we explore stories, we explore mindsets and the strategies that help us overcome adversities and rise with purpose. I'm your host, Jose Pereira, and today I have an incredible guest. I'm kind of a woohoo, because I want to say something related to this guest, how I get connected to him. Some months ago, I was contacted by a lady, Sarah McBee. I didn't know her. And when I saw what she was doing a podcast trying to push and raise awareness with a wrongfully detention that her husband was having. And when we did the connection, for me, it was like a divine connection because it really resonated his story because that was exactly what happened to me in a different way. But I was held hostage in a foreign country, and we were accused to be American spies and a lot of, you know, shame things, shame trials, and we went through a lot of things. And when I knew his story, I remember I told her, he's gonna come out, and really, when he comes out, I will love to talk with him. What I never thought that I would have him here as a guest. So for me, it's a real pleasure to have him. I'm going to give you a little insight of who is this guy. His name is Colton McAbee. So Colton was a former deputy sheriff who served in Cherokee County in Georgia and later in Williamson County in Tennessee. You began serving at the age of 27, and he really gained a very strong reputation of a man of courage and honor in the law enforcement. He was trained in tactical operation, and he was really very committed to the community with a strong background. But in 2021 happened something that today I say that when adversity comes, you never will expect. He became one of the most controversial figures in an event that was called here the January 6th event in the U.S. Capitol Hill. You know, he was accused of several felonies. His badge was taken. His life began to be upside down. What followed to be a painful situation, going to courtrooms, prison cells, and public opinion. When I heard this, I said, oh, this is my story too. So, as I said, I get connected with Sarah that did an incredible job. She put the Sarah McAbee show where she was always talking to tell the truth. So I'm going to give today the mics to Colton. So welcome being my guest, Colton. The mics are yours.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I mean, I was a sheriff deputy in Georgia and in Tennessee. And, I did that for about 7 years. I did most of it inside the jails and the prison system. And then I did a year at the courthouse. I would never imagine myself being on the other side of the wall, being locked in. And when I found myself on that side, it was so surreal. It was so, I mean, it was ironic for one, but for two, it was kind of like an eye opener. You know, and my world came crashing down, to be honest with you. But I mean, I got through it. I got through it with, first and foremost, God, and then, with my wife. I would call her once a day for 15 minutes a day, and that was my whole marriage for 3.5 years. It was 15 minutes a day. But I hit my knees and I prayed so hard, and I begged God to sit there and do something. And you know, it's His timing. It's not my timing, even though I wish His timing was soon or sooner than what it was. But 3.5 years later, I'm out. I'm free. I have no criminal history. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a terrorist, is what they called me. I'm not a terrorist, and I served my community and my country honorably.
Well, I'm hearing your story, my friend, and it's giving me a goosebump because I relate so much with your story. And I'm going to tell you that that's what God does. So for some reason, you went to the desert, but now you're out. So you prayed and you're a man of God. And that's the way God operates. And you said it very clear. It's not in our time, it's in his time. But you had something very important. You had the support of your wife,
Yes.
and you had the support of God. And this is something that is very powerful, very powerful. So I want you to let's begin with your early story, because you begin very early in the law enforcement. Talk a little bit about that, about your early story.
So I grew up in a military household. And so like serving my community and serving other people were kind of ingrained in me. I didn't want to actually go into law enforcement. I actually wanted to go into business. I went to college for business. I majored in football and minored in business is what I tell people. And I graduated with my degree, my business degree, and I couldn't find a job. And I knew the prisons and the jails were always hiring. So I put in an application. I started in a Tennessee state prison system and then transferred out into a a deputy role within the county. And so it's for that it kind of sparked an interest. It wasn't, drive fast cars and shoot guns. It was, oh, I get to actually help people. I meet everybody on their worst day. So now I can sit there and actually become somebody who can actually help them go through what they're going through. A lot of the times it didn't work out. It just it it was a revolving door, you know, and that actually kind of devastated me seeing these people come in all the time back to back. So the recidivism rate was, awful. And then you know, it, that got me to where, but they don't tell you that when you become an officer or a deputy sheriff or whatever, law enforcement, that you're not just, writing tickets, you're not arresting people. You are actually a therapist. You're sitting there and you're actually talking to people and making sure you leave them better than you found them. And so that kind of resonated with me, and that actually sparked my passion. And like I said, I did it for a little over 7 years, maybe around seven on the dot. And, I mean, that's just who I am. I mean, even today, even though I'm not currently, serving in that aspect, you can't take the cop out of me.
Yeah, yeah. Let me tell you something. And did you see people restored? Have you had some story of people that you really saw them restored?
Yeah, so there's a lot of guys that would come through the jail, and I would sit there and talk to them. I treat them like men first and foremost. I treat them with as much respect as I could. And then I would tell them, hey, let me treat you like a man before I have to treat you like, an inmate. But just know if I have to treat you like an inmate, I'm just doing my job. I don't want to sit there and do it this way. I'd rather do it, amicably. But, you know, at the end of the day, I do have a job to do. And so they would come in and, their world's crashing down. And it got to the point where I would sit there and just intervene. And I actually saw some people, out in the community, and they would run up, hey, Deputy Macri. I'm like, oh no, like, how do I know you, this or that? And they're like, hey, look, you helped me come through a hard time in jail. I appreciate you. This is what I'm doing. I got a new job. I just got married or we're just having kids. And that actually brought a smile to, my heart. And then, I mean, and on the flip side, you had those people who got out and tried their best to do something great and they just couldn't beat the system. They just, they would cycle back through. But those are the ones that I truly try to work on is those that cycled.
I have met during this journey like three cases of people. There is a guy that he stayed like 60 years in prison, and he came back and he started a foundation. Today he has a foundation in Dallas. There is another lady that she now has also a foundation helping people that have been incarcerated. And also know a guy that's still incarcerated, but he has some kind of benefit and he runs a podcast in his prison. So,
Hmm.
so you can really see people doing better. It's sometimes a matter of, your personality and I always say the connection that you get with God. So now you have this wonderful career that you love, that you feel so much passion, and then comes January 6th. So, so that comes an event that you will never expect. Tell me about that. Tell me your truth about that.
So January 6th, so what actually led up to January 6th was I got off a shift at the jail. I was working overnight and I fell asleep at the wheel on December 27th, 2020, and actually wrecked my truck. I rolled it 12 times and I broke my collar or I broke my shoulder. And then that actually gave me time off to go to January 6th. A buddy of mine actually invited me to go and he paid for everything, hotel, gas, and he's like, "Hey, look, just come on up." And we exchanged some messages back and forth, and talking about, if a certain group of people showed up, to protest and, cause violence, what we would do, this and that.
Yeah.
And so we get to January 6th, we don't see any of that. We see a whole bunch of, Trump supporters, MAGA, and, we just fall in the crowd and actually go and, my whole thing was to see President Trump speak because I've actually never been to a political rally. I've never heard him speak live before. I've only, listened to him on TV. And so I thought this was, hey, look, I got the day off. I'm on medical leave. I'm not working. I got cabin fever. I'm tired of staying at the house. Why not? And so I go, and he told me what to wear just in case anybody attacked us. And so I'm kitted out. I got my vest on. It has a big old sheriff patch on it, just so to deter other people from, trying to hurt me. And then I had my MAGA hat on, and I had gloves. And so we go and we listen to Trump speak, and he says, "We're going to go on down to the Capitol and make your voices peacefully and patriotically heard." And that's the key, peacefully and patriotically, because the leftist mainstream media wants to leave that out all the time.
Yeah.
And so we go, we stay till Trump's actually finished speaking, and we go on down to the Capitol. And going to the Capitol, I actually start hearing these bangs, like these booms and whatnot. I'm like, this is a weird time for fireworks to go off. Is that even legal in the city? And so we get closer, and there's a whole crowd forming at the Capitol, and we make our way towards the front. We're waving flags, chanting, singing, praying, and then all of a sudden, chaos ensues, and people are getting pepper sprayed, flash banged, tear gassed. I actually had a grenade come through the police line and land at my feet. I saw it come through the air, and I only had time to brace myself. And once it exploded, like 100 rubber bullets came out, and it ripped my leg up to pieces. And I actually saw a guy with a hole in his cheek because he got shot in the face with one of those. Some time passes, and next thing you know, the people are on top of the Capitol. And, my buddy and I were talking. It's like, hey, look, what do we do? Do we just go back to the hotel? Do we go? And, he gives this very passionate speech about this is our house. This is our time. We're here to, do this and do that. Like, they can't take this away from us. We've got to stop the steal. I said, well, I've got a job to consider. I've got, I've got to, think about my future. You work for the government. I don't. I work for law enforcement. It might be the local government, but it's not the government. And so, we go back and forth, and ultimately, I made the decision to go up there myself. And so I make my way up there, and we're in the crowd, and he crowd surfs up, and I'm getting squeezed. And so I'm trying to make my way through so I can breathe. And I find myself at the very top, we're at the tunnel, the famous tunnel.
Mhm.
And there's a lady down right there in front of me. And so I'm grabbing her, me and a guy with red face paint on, and we grab her and pull her to safety because at this time they just tear gassed and pepper sprayed the entire tunnel. So everybody's falling out. There's a huge waterfall of people as well, that what I say. And so we pull her to safety and I pass her back, after, I calmed her down, hugged her. I passed her behind me, and then an officer goes down.
What is the name of the lady?
I never caught the name of that lady, so there's two of them. I never caught the name of
Okay,
that
yeah.
lady.
Okay.
So then the officer goes down and he just slides down the stairs right in front of me. It happened in like 2 seconds. And I couldn't do anything about that. And then I saw another officer go down, and I'm like, well, he's not going in the crowd because I don't know how the crowd's going to react to him. I don't know where the first officer went. He just disappeared. So I put myself in between the crowd and the officer, and I'm over here trying to pick him up by the vest. I'm just grabbing him, every time I yank, I get hit in the head with a baton, which is deadly force. And after like maybe the third or fourth hit, and I'm getting pepper sprayed as well, I pop up and I start yelling, and I said not some so nice things. I had a favorite word and it was not a nice word. And for that, it is embarrassing, but I said what I said, and I've apologized for that. I'm only human. Um,
Or you were in a chaotic moment.
yeah, I mean for sure. And so at that point in time, I'm still trying to yank him up, and then I see another lady in the corner.
Okay.
Her name's Roseanne Boylan.
Yeah, yeah, that's the first was it. I thought the first was it. Okay.
Yeah, so Roseanne Boylan, she's from Georgia, and we actually lived a county apart, and I never knew her. I've never seen her before. We've probably crossed paths, before this at some point. But she was laying there, and she's already turning blue. She's bleeding. She's, like not responding to anything. And every time I reached for her, I got hit in the head again. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And so after a while, I had this huge gash right here, and I mean, I could stick my whole fingertip in it, and because it just kept on repeatedly getting hit. And so at the after reaching for her, telling the cops, "Hey, you got a dead lady here. I'm trying to help." Another officer comes out and pushes me down the stairs with his baton and hits me in the rib. And so my training's already activated, right? I'm trying to help these people. And so what my training tells me to do is separate myself from the perceived threat. So I push this guy away from me. I don't engage, I push, disengage him, and go back to the officer and Roseanne. And as soon as I try to pick this officer up again, because Roseanne's already being, tended to by another person, I get dragged down the stairs with the officer. And next thing I know, I'm being called a traitor. And then, I hear take his gun. And so I'm protecting this officer. I say, no, quit. And it's all on video. And, I'm protecting him from the crowd. And he says, get off me, man. And I said, I'm trying to help you. And he says, I know, help me up. And then the body cam footage, you'll see him actually turn over and he'll go up into the police line. And then you'll see a video from another angle where I'm actually running behind him, pushing him back to the police line. And then I try to find Roseanne. And so Roseanne's not at where she was when I was last up there. And so I keep on scanning and I scan to my left and I see somebody doing CPR. I'm like, well, I'm a first responder. I know how to do CPR. Maybe I don't know if this guy knows how to do it properly or not, so I'm going to lend my services. It turns out that's Roseanne as well. So Roseanne's sitting there laying lifeless, being, performed on. And, I'm digging through a bag for a mask to do mouth to mouth. I'm trying to feel a pulse. We can't feel anything. And so we decided to bring her up back to the police line because I know they have medics back there. I know there's, proper people who can do way more than I can. And they have a defibrillator, which could shock her heart back.
Sure.
And so we bring her back up there and we get pepper sprayed before we even set her down on the ground. Now, the guy who's doing chest compressions, he sits there and says, I need help. I need compressions. I need compressions. So I take over on the chest compressions and I get about 3 or 4 pumps in and I get ripped off by another protester and they drag Roseanne's body through the tunnel. And so I'm posted up. I can't believe what I just witnessed. I can't believe what I just saw. And, the officer actually thanked me for my service. And then another round of chaos ensues. And he actually protects me from his people and from the crowd. And so after all that, an elderly lady comes out of nowhere. I don't even know how she got up there. Grabs me by the arm, turns me around and leads me through the crowd back to safety. And I'm just like, and I was trying to actually go inside because the people behind me, the crowd behind me was calling me a traitor because I wasn't trying to hurt cops. I wasn't trying to fight, I was just trying to help. And so I'm like, hey, let me through, please. I can't go back this way. Have you seen these types of people? And so that's when she came around and actually helped me out. And I went home after I spent the night in DC, went home after, went back to work for 7 months. And then on August 17th, 2021, I got picked up by the FBI pulling into work. And, I didn't see the day of light outside of a jail after that until January 20th, 2025.
Wow, wow, incredible story, my friend. Let me tell you something. Well, first of all, that is something that it's incredible that it happened. How the people can get that way. I come from a country that when I hear this story, I always think about that uh, the American people that don't understand how precious is the democracy, and so really you need to preserve it. But that's another story. Let's concentrate in your story. But so now you're in prison. So your life is flipped down. You were one day in this side, and now you are in this side.
Mhm.
How was life there? How you encounter God? Tell me about that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a great question. So going from actually, working in a jail to living in a jail is a complete culture shock. I knew kind of what to expect because I was in there, I worked there, but I never lived there. I never got that feeling before of that door closing behind you and you can't open it, you
Yeah.
know, or having the cuffs on and the waist chain and the shackles and having to move and you're doing the shuffle and you got to walk upstairs and go on the airplane and sit beside two big men and you're in the middle like this and trying to eat and yeah, it was
And the
insane.
handcuff,
Yes,
the
the
feeling.
handcuff for sure. And like you can only move like this. And it was awful. The treatment wasn't that great. Obviously, it's jail. I understand that. But at the end of the day, we're humans. And that's how I presented myself to my inmates. And so I thought, hey, look, this is common sense. These people are having a bad day. You don't want to make them more mad. So treat them right. Well, I didn't get that when I went to DC. Now, I've been to 12 different jails. I got diesel therapy, which means they put me on a bus or an airplane just because they wanted to break my spirit. And so I went to 12 different places. I did majority of my time in DC. When I got to DC, it was the most horrible aspect of my life, and the whole time. I was with the other January Sixers, so that was the positive part.
You
But
were
I
together.
experienced
You were
we were
together.
together. Yep. But the racism that we experienced because we were white and in the majority of, African American environment, they didn't like us for that. It was a 99% liberal town, so they didn't like us because we're Trump supporters. Of course, we're domestic terrorists to them because we went to the Capitol. A lot of us just went inside and, just walked around. Some of us, got in altercations. And, some of us deserved to go to prison, but a lot of us didn't. A lot of us, were just caught up in something. We're trying to help people or, whatever. And so they kind of blanket labeled us and they treated us with disrespect, and we didn't have any visitation for over a year. I think it was 580 something days before I had my first visit. We couldn't get haircuts for a year. We had to chew our nails because we couldn't get nail clippers. And I know, I say this, I've said this to other people before, and they're like, it's jail, get over it. Well, yeah, but there's basic hygienes, human hygiene things you need to do. We had a, we sometimes we could shower, sometimes we couldn't. 24-hour lockdowns that would extend multiple days. It's just everything they could do to break us down, and we refused to break. They would cut off our phones because now mind you, we didn't get visitation, so we lived on the phone and calling our loved ones. They cut that off. They moved us around to different unit. They made us, basically do all the dog work of cleaning every place that we went to because it was horrible. But we would sit there and get on our hands and knees and scrub because we weren't living in filth. They would sit there and, mess with our food. They would sit there and call us different names. We had some, like one officer say that they wish that we were in general population so that Black Lives Matter could stab us to death. And that's the type of people that we were dealing with. These officers. It wasn't inmates, it was officers that we had to watch our backs with. And me coming from that environment and that background, it truly ticked me off. It made me so upset. And I would sit there, I wouldn't hold back. I say, look, how can you call yourself an officer and wish death upon an inmate like this? How can you do that? You swore an oath to help everybody, and your goal is, whether as bad as it sounds, make sure I live till next shift. That's it. And the way you treat me is the way you're going to get treated. And we had several times where officers would sit there and treat us great, treat us like men that we are. And when the administration found out, those officers who treated us with respect
They're removed.
were actually taken off the job and put into a worse unit for punishment.
Wow. Wow. When I'm hearing that, I'm surprised because what I'm hearing is similar to what we've lived, but we were in another country. We were in a communist regime. So hearing these things happening here in the US is incredible. Wow. I'm in shock hearing you guys. But thanks God you're out. So one of the things that in hearing you for me is very interesting is first, as I said, the support of your wife, that is very key. You believe in God, super key. And being together. When you have the opportunity to be with other people, like it happened to us when we were captured, we were six guys. So we had the opportunity to be the six together. And this is something that the people that today I'm connected and I went to therapies and all this stuff, they said that this is very key, having the human connection because you create that bond because you're going to the same situation. Talk a little bit about
Yeah, so I'm in contact with several other January Sixers. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this at any means necessary. I mean, there's some that I like, there's some that I dislike, but we all went through the same thing, and I can respect that.
that. Correct, correct.
The January Sixers that I'm in active contact with, we created a bond like no other. They're actually closer than me than my own brothers are, and because we actually went through a trial and adversity together, and that's how brothers are born, and that's what it says in the Bible. And we
You
went
today are band of brothers, my friend.
exactly, and we went through this, and we know what we feel. We know the psychological trauma or warfare that they tried. We know what it feels like to be locked down and can't see our family and loved ones. And sometimes we'll have actually, we'll have a issue now that we're out. Something might pop up. It's like, hey, I need to call this guy, and I just need to talk, and we have that, and whether like I have my group of people, other people have their group of people, but at least we have somebody. And that somebody went through the same thing that we went through. And, we can sit there and vent, we can talk, and we can do this and that. And that's what we needed. And it's like I can't talk to, Joe Schmo off the street about what I experienced because he never experienced it. I could say, I could tell him everything, but he'll never know that feeling.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we're in communication, we're in contact, and we have all the supporters and helplines that we could actually have. But it's an amazing thing that 4 years later we are still strong and we're still relevant.
Let me tell you, this is so important, the sense of community. I today, in my case, I belong to what is called the hostage community here in the US. This flag that you see here is the hostage flag. And I'm very proud that this flag today is official flag here in the US. And there are 80 families created this flag, and my family was one of them. So having that sense of community that today I belong to it because people have gone through my situation in other countries, we're connected. And then, so I applaud you what you're doing, my friend, because that is something that creates that the sense of community, sense of brotherhood, because all of you went through the same situation. Let's talk about your relation with God. This is something that for me is key in all of this because believe me, sometimes you don't see that why things are happening, but always there is a lesson behind. Always is the hand of God because God put you through tribulations, but He is always there. He never abandoned. He will not put you more that you can support. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually grew up as a preacher's kid. And I went to church every Sunday, every Wednesday night. If it was a church function, I was there. mainly because my dad was the pastor, but because I actually wanted to be there. And that was, ever since I was, you know, basically born all the way up to, I got married. After I got married, I went to church sometimes here or there. I had a business on the side selling holsters. I was gone every weekend. Sometimes I would stream church in on my phone while I'm selling holsters. But it's like life gets busy and you put, stuff that you think is unimportant on the back burner.
You put
And
God beside.
yeah, and I was putting my fleshly desires before God. And during the whole year of 2020, I haven't really talked too much about this, but during the whole year of 2020, I was getting ready to walk away from my faith. I was like, I'm tired of the church basically saying that I need to be a weak man, and this is my feelings, being a weak man, being sissified and, submission this, submission that. And, I want a warrior. I want to follow somebody who's actually going to fight for something. And this is, this is stupidity talking to me. And so at the end of the year, I get in my wreck, and I've kind of, walked away almost completely, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, God's still real, he's still there. So I get in my wreck and I survived out. The only thing I did was break my shoulder. I rolled it 12 times and I get out of there. I walk out of the wreck. I had to kick myself out of the door. And so I walked out of the wreck and I'm like, I'm Superman. Ain't nothing can kill me. And I didn't even thank God. I didn't do that. And so I went to January 6th, and then in August of 2021, I got arrested. And I'm still on this kind of journey of, maybe, like maybe he's forgotten about me or, in reality, I'm forgetting about him. And I get locked up and the first, question out of the jailer's mouth is, what's your religion? And I was going to say, like no religion, paganism, whatever. And if said, and because I had that on my tongue, I was already going to answer that. And what came out and said was Christianity. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? And so I was locked in a cell for 3 days for quarantine, and I was given a Bible. And, I've read the Bible so many times growing up. That day, I found so many new passages. I've reread stories that I've just read hundreds of times, and it just spoke different to me. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm listening. All right, so you've got my attention now. I mean, you've got nothing but my attention. I can't do anything else. And so throughout the years of me being locked up and actually diving deep inside my Bible and having actual fruitful prayer time, and because I have nothing but him, it's, be silent and know that I'm God. Well, that's real. I mean, especially when you're locked up and you have nobody else to talk
Yeah.
to. If you're 23, hours locked down and 1 hour out, whatever, it is real. And he spoke to me, and it's like I felt like I could actually hear him now, and I could feel him, and it's just I've been on fire ever since, and I've made a promise, like, hey, every chance I can, I'm gonna talk about him, I'm gonna tell everybody that's how I got through prison, him and my wife, and this shirt right here says unafraid, and it's a Christian shirt, and I'm unafraid to be a Christian. I'm unafraid.
And you have today something powerful. You have your testimony, my friend.
Exactly.
So now you carry out a testimony that's going to put you there, and you're going to be now a warrior of God, and you're going to be saving souls because you carry your testimony, my friend.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the whole aspect of me thinking that I was being a sissy because, that's what I thought church was telling me, that I was completely wrong.
Yeah.
When I opened that Bible, I found out, yeah, he is the lamb, but he's also a lion. He's also he's going to come back on a white horse and take his people with him. He fought death and won. So what was I thinking? You know?
Yeah, yeah. So now this is a powerful message of faith, marriage, and restoration. So, well, you have your wife, as I said, I had the honor to be a guest in her show, and she's a warrior. I always told her she's like my wife. She's my hero, and your wife, I know this, your hero too. Talk
Mhm.
about how's your relation. before and after?
Good question. There's a lot of stigma in law enforcement about being bad husbands, and a lot of that's true. I wasn't very attentive. I was there physically, I was there in the moment. I wasn't there mentally, and I feel like, I do regret that for 100%. Because I thought everything's an emergency in my life, and I need to go, 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 go.
Mhm.
And I just, the whole thing is with law enforcement, with first responders. If you're in the chaos, that's your calming mechanism. Being frantic, like going 100 miles per hour, that's when you're the most calm as law enforcement.
Yeah.
And when you're calm, the silence is deafening. It is eerie feeling, and that's where I was at that time. And so, of course, that bled over to my marriage. I wasn't a great husband at that point in time. That I said a lot of things I shouldn't have said. I did a lot of things I shouldn't have done. I never walked out on her. I've never cheated on her, but I wasn't being, the Christian husband I should have been, the things I would say and how I would say them, that kind of things was going on. And so I get locked up and I'm like, oh man, like, all right, whatever. Like this sucks, we've got to do something. And slowly, I started changing, how I viewed her and how I viewed my marriage. I'm like, oh my God, this is taken away from me. And they always say you don't appreciate something until it's taken away. And that's true with marriage as well when you're locked up. And, of course I had my good days and I had my bad days while I was inside of prison. And some days I'd sit there and just yell on the phone, not at her, but to her about the situation I'm in. And, to me, having her being taken away from me actually made me appreciate her more. I had 15 minutes a day to talk to her, and that's what my whole marriage was for 3.5 years, 15 minutes a day. And so, that was a struggle. That was a horrible struggle. We kind of we embraced it. We did what we had to do, and then I get pardoned. I'm out, and it's been over 100 days now, and yeah, it's a struggle now. Because I'm trying to find myself again, because my whole entire life was law enforcement, and now I'm doing something else. I just started a new job today, actually, as a in pest control, which is something I would never, thought about doing. Um, and so we're still working through this, but and I say but a big but. I do still have my bad days. I have great days. We are working, together to get through this. There's a lot of changing I need to do. There's a lot of stuff that I need to work on myself. But, I made a promise to myself, to God and her, that, I would treat her like a godly husband. And that's the path that we're on now. I'm using my experiences and my time with God to sit there and like, okay, how do I respond to this? Because I used to fly off the handle and now I'm not. How do I respond? Am I responding in good faith and godliness, or am I responding as I used to be? And if I respond as I used to be, I have to pump the brakes and sit there, okay, let's do it this way with God. And that's how we are now.
Well, continue with your faith, my friend, because God is operating in you, and maybe you don't see the the effects immediately, but they're gonna come. They're gonna come. They're gonna come because again, this is a story of restoration. This is a story. I relate a lot. I'm hearing you, my friend, and I'm seeing my picture. So I can tell you that keep stuck to your faith, my friend, because he's going to do his job. And you're going to get surprised the miracles that are going to begin to happen in your life. Because there is something else that now you have something that most of the people don't have. Not only you have your testimony, now you have your gratitude. Because this is something that when you come out, you begin to express gratitude because you have lost your freedom. You know, it's something that is so precious. So how is your connection today related to the gratitude?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very grateful. A lot of guys got out and had nothing. And, I'm one of the lucky ones. I got out and my in-laws gave me a truck to drive. My wife provided a roof over my head. and food in my belly. I mean, I am one of the lucky ones, and I'm grateful. And you get caught up in the moment. Sometimes you don't say how grateful you are. Sometimes you don't say thank you. And I have to stop and pause. Like, hey, did I say that? Did I say thank you yet? And like everything. I'm not saying it's been handed to me because I fought for everything that I needed to fight for.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that it's okay for people to help you, and it's okay to receive that help. And so with my in-laws, helping me, and not even my family, it's my wife's family, like I haven't even talked to my family. They haven't even reached out since I've been out. It's my in-laws that are helping me. It's my wife that's helping me, obviously. And I am very grateful for that. I feel like I've won a lottery, and I mean I'm not where I was, financially, but I've gained so much more on the other end.
Tell me something. Well, it's only 100 days, but have you ever thought writing your story, beginning to? Because I said you have something powerful today. You have your testimony, and believe me, this message that you carry out today is going to relate to a lot of people. People that are going through situation in life. I always talk. By the way, I became a speaker after this, and one of the things I always talk is that you don't have to be a prisoner, uh, but you can be prisoner in your beliefs, your things that you're going through. Sometimes this type of prison can be even worse than a physical prison. So what do you think is going to be your life? Now you're beginning a job. This is something that is in a short term. But what is your real vision? What you want to do with your life
Yeah, that's a great question as well. I mean, all these are great questions.
now?
Obviously, this job that I have right now is short term. It's giving me money in my pocket so I can give back to the people who gave to me. My ultimate goal, and I'm doing this, I do speak. I have had, opportunities to tell my story. I am in the middle of writing a book, and I'm just not good at, just I'm making an excuse here, and all it is an excuse, and I am procrastinating like no other. I've got most of it written out, and then sometimes I just have to put it down and then pick it up back later. So I am in the process of that. That's about January 6th and my life during prison. I want to sit there and tell my story, but not just about January 6th. I want to tell about my faith walk. And so that's where I'm transitioning into from January 6th, because, I mean, that gets my foot in the door. But that transition from being a conservative public speaker into a Christian public speaker. And that's my goal. That's one of my dreams. And I want to give back to the community, especially my first responder community. I want to address the mental health issues that we have. I want to address the reason why there's so many suicides in first responders. There's more suicides than line of duty deaths, and that's a problem. And we have a stigma in law enforcement because that's where where I did my time. But even just first responders in general, we have a stigma that's saying if you ask for help, you're weak. But if you survive a shooting, and you're a strong man and we put you on a pedestal and you're somebody. We've got that like if now that I know if you ask me for help, I'm gonna put you way up here because you actually were man enough and to ask for help. And so I had a thought the other day and I actually heard somebody speak about this. I was more comfortable, thinking, if I would clear the house, I was more comfortable with getting shot in the face and telling my wife I'm sorry. And that's the issue that we have in first, as a first responder. And I want to address that. I want to make sure it's okay to sit there and ask, like I said, ask for help, ask for guidance, and actually bring these young people up into the profession and say, hey, look, you're not weak. You're okay. It's okay to do this. And that's my main focus. I'm trying to, get that out there. I'm trying to sit there and help other people. It's getting your foot in the door in law enforcement community or first responder community, it is hard, especially with, law enforcement to prison, and then now you're free. So, I mean, we are working on that. And I know before the year's over with, I will have an audience for that.
I can see a nonprofit there, my friend.
Yes,
Good for
sir.
you. Good for you. And I love that the approach of that you try to put in your book, because that is exactly what happened to me when I came out. I was gonna tell my story, the situation I went through, but I really begin to think that more than that is that transformation, that restoration, how you rediscover your connection with God. That is more important. And today, for me, my book became an international award, and for me, it was the legacy that you're living there. So I see that in you, your case too. So I praise that your book comes with that, you know, that sense of restoration and strong belief in God. So let's close this with the human touch. So talk about you, yourself. What are your dreams today? You talked about that you want to help the law enforcement, first responder, but how you see yourself in the future? Where you think you're going to be in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, my wife says I have so many projects in the garage, and I mean, she's true about that. I want to do all sorts of things. I want to do everything underneath the sun, and I know I need to narrow it down. One dream that's been on my mind is, have a political run, serve my community that way, and not for the U.S. Congress or Senate. I want to be the next governor of Tennessee, and I've got to work hard for that. I'm not a hardcore Republican. Of course, I'm not, a hardcore Democrat. I'm more slightly right of center. I have, Democratic ideas. I have Republican ideas. But what I call it is I have human ideas. And my whole thing with being, if I was the governor, my first and foremost thing would be, how does this help the people? And can we get this transparent to the people so they can read it and see for themselves that it's good for them? That's one thing. Like I said, I want to do the public speaking arena. I want to do, sometimes I just want to sit back and relax and do nothing, and just go into a cabin and just watch a fire, burn out type of thing in a campfire. So I have all these things. But the biggest thing is, like I said, the ultimate, I can hang my t hat up is when I become governor of Tennessee. And I don't even know if that's ever going to happen, but I
It's going
can,
to happen. It's going to
but
happen, and you have to keep this recording, because in some years this is going to be
yeah,
a prophetic recording, my friend. You're going
right.
to believe me.
And it'll 100% will not happen if I don't pursue it. So as long as I pursue it, I can say I tried. If I win, I win. If I lose, I run again.
I have a friend that he also was a hostage in Venezuela, and he's a lawyer, a public lawyer of California. And when his name is Aiden Hernandez, when Aiden came back, I told him, Aiden, you carry out today something that's very powerful, because you have been a public defender, and he was also working in prison cells. But now you went to this situation, so you have a unique situation. So I told him, you can become the next governor of California. So now I'm hearing you. So yeah, of course. So both of you carried out that, because you have been working in the prison system. You have all this, and now you have gone through this situation. So pursue your dream, my friend. You have to hear my speech. I always talk about my carry-on story. When I was in my hostage situation, the last year that we were having negotiation, I told the ambassador that finally free us, that I was gone. That I didn't know when, but I was gone. So I asked my wife to bring a small carry-on, and I took that carry-on during 1 year, talking to it, saying, "You're gonna go with me." So for me, that carry-on are my dreams. I gave the big luggage to God, and I took my carry-on that were my dreams. So take your carry-ons and take your dreams, and they're gonna come true. So that's my final reflection to you. So we're coming to the end, my friend. This went really fast. So your last 5 minutes to talk whatever you want to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, thank you for having me on here. Thank you to your audience for actually watching this. Um, you know, they call me a terrorist. They call me a hero. I'm neither one of those. I'm just a man who honored my oath that day. I help people. That's what I do. And, the thing that I went through, I feel like I was basically trained to do that. I was in the prison system as an officer my entire adult life, and then I became a prisoner. And so I have a unique perspective, and I want to use that perspective to help other people. So, however that may be, if it's one of your audience members that are dealing with the same thing that I went through, or even know somebody, please reach out. My I'm on Instagram. I'm on, Twitter at
You're
real.
gonna give me your contact. The contacts are gonna appear there, and you can say where is the best way to reach.
Yeah, I mean, reach me at real Sheriff Mac. It's just, that's all my handles. And, I want to help other people. Now, I'm not the best at communication, so if I don't reply, send me another one. Send me, hey, did you get that? But I want to help other people. And me helping other people is you helping me, because I get a sense of self-worth of me actually helping other people succeed in life. And so you can go there. My wife and a friend of mine, Shane Jenkins, they run Foundation. And what that does is they help other J6ers. It was with lawyers. Now it's to help rebuild their lives. If you want to donate there or see what's up, or donate any time of whatever's going on, go to the website Foundation. And then look at all the other J6 communities and organizations. They're all out there to help us, and we can all use the help, because we might be pardoned, but we're still struggling because the government took our jobs away. They took our ability to make money away, and it took me 100 days to find a job, and I went from law enforcement to pest control. I mean,
Yeah.
not my move, but it happened. And there's a lot of other guys out there still without a job, so anything helps.
Well, I'm going to connect you with, now that you want to be a Christian speaker, I'm going to connect with some communities that are in the Christian side, to become Christian speakers. So I'm going to connect. I'm going to send you some links there. And well, my final word to you, my friend, I'm proud to have you here, my friend. I'm really proud. I enjoy this conversation, because if you hear my story, you will see that I have been talking many things that I heard today in you. I said, wow, it's incredible. So thank you. They say hello to Sarah. She's a wonderful person. I really admire her. I'm very proud of you, my friend, and continue what you're doing. Pursue your dreams. And this recording, keep it. When you become governor, you will hear this and say, this was a prophetic recording. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Okay. Well, okay. We're coming to the end. Thank you, the people that enjoy this program. This program, I'm going to air it in a couple of weeks. And then, well, let's keep in touch. Thank you, my friend, for being here, part of the show. Bye.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Bye.
What if everything you knew about leadership was wrong? What if true leadership wasn't about power, but about service? The world is changing, and those who lead with impact and empathy are the ones reshaping the future. Welcome to the podcast experience, where influence is built on impact, and success is measured by the lives you transform. Today's world is in crisis. Leaders are disconnected. Businesses are crumbling. Employees are disengaged. Traditional leadership models are failing, and people are looking for something different. Leaders who serve, not dictate. A leader who empowers, not controls. A leader who listens before they speak. But here's the truth. Leadership isn't about titles. It's about action. It's about the legacy you build through the lives you touch. Now imagine a world where leadership looks different, where a CEO doesn't command from the top, but inspires from within, where managers don't control, but empower and uplift. This is the era of actionable servant leadership, and it's transforming businesses, communities, and lives. Lead by listening. The best leaders ask, how can I serve you? Before giving orders, seek to understand. Serve first, succeed. Second, true leaders put people first. When you uplift your team, success naturally follows. Empower, don't control. Replace micromanagement with trust. Give people the tools and freedom to excel. Actionable servant leadership isn't a theory. It's a superpower that unlocks human potential. The world is looking for leaders who serve, lead, and inspire. Will you step up? Will you be the leader who changes the game? This is your moment. This is your call to lead differently, serve boldly, and transform lives.